How many times do you say, I think, in a day? I think this, I think that, I think maybe. Now, there's nothing wrong with I think, but what if you simply had more options? Because today isn't about correcting your English. It's not about saying one way is better than another. It's about expanding your range so you can express yourself with more variety, more nuance, and more freedom. Now, I think is useful. You don't need to stop using it. But if it's the only way that you can express your opinion, well, your English starts to feel a bit repetitive. I think it's a really good idea because I think, because I think, because I think. And language becomes much more interesting when you have choice. And the first one has to be I believe. Now, believe can also be used to mean I think. So I think the meeting starts at 11 a.m. or I believe the meeting starts at 11 a.m. If anything, I believe shows you're a bit more confident in your opinion or what you're actually thinking. So I think you're right. I believe you're right. And before we continue, please do remember there is a free PDF that you can download to learn even more about this lesson. I really believe that you're going to like it. And please do remember to like and hype this lesson as it helps other learners to learn as well. But next up, we have I feel like. I feel like is a bit more personal and a bit more intuitive. So, for example, instead of saying, I think this might be the better option, you could say, I feel like this might be the better option. It's really got that kind of emotional edge to it. So, for example, we're at a party and then somebody introduces me and I say, hello there, and you don't get the reference. I could say, I feel like you might need to watch more Star Wars, or I feel like you haven't watched that much Star Wars. It seems to me, is a bit more observational, and it's a little bit more neutral, and it's kind of relying on evidence and what we're deducing from a certain situation. So it seems to me they're already aware of this issue. So maybe I'm seeing some kind of action, something's happening in relation to a problem. It's a kind of logical deduction. I suppose adds a little touch of hesitation, and it's kind of a way of making a suggestion. So yeah, I suppose we could try something different. This is a really natural way of introducing your own ideas or even agreeing with another person's opinion. You don't want to go to that restaurant? Yeah, I suppose we could try something different. I'd say it's quite balanced and quite measured. It shows you've really thought about your opinion. It's also quite confident, but still quite open. Pretty weird use of language when you think about it. I would say, usually contracted to I'd say, but we are actually saying it. So instead of saying, I think this is the easiest way, you could say, I'd say this is probably the easiest way. It gives a bit more weight to your opinion than just a simple I think. This one is pretty useful when your opinion is based on what you can see or you understand. So this one's more based on evidence. From what I can tell, everything is working fine. Maybe somebody saying, oh, there's a problem with the machine, and I have a look at it, and well, from what I can tell, everything's working fine. Now, interestingly here, there is a little bit of distance between saying it's working and from what I can tell. And this is a standard bit of British culture. We often add this kind of hedging approach or a little bit of distance from our opinions to soften them, partially so we don't sound too cocky or arrogant in our opinion, but also in case we're actually wrong. So what we're saying here is, from what I can tell, in my experience, I think it's all right, but I might be wrong. I reckon is more informal than I think, and it's really common in everyday British English. So, I reckon it'll take about an hour. It's pretty much a like-for-like replacement of I think, but it's slightly more informal. Another one that helps you sound less direct when giving your opinion and a little bit softer entry into your idea is I'm not sure, but. A lot of British people say this. Now, I'm going to talk about the culture of this in a moment, but I'm not sure, but it might be worth checking again. I'm not sure, but I think he made a reference to Star Wars. I did. I really did. If I'm totally honest, I often make Star Wars references and other film references that I love in the vague hope that somebody understands them, and quite often, people don't get them. But if you get them, please do let me know in the comments. Do it. Do it! But going back to I'm not sure, but it's a really nice way to introduce your opinion without sounding too direct. Now, on a cultural note, just because we use this structure, I'm not sure, but, which sounds like you're not really confident, it doesn't mean that we're not confident. Quite often, British people will use an expression like this to soften the impact of their opinion and not to sound too arrogant. But I would honestly say that quite a lot of British people will say this when they are 100% confident they are right. I'm not sure, but I think a lot of people use this that way. It could be that opens a possibility instead of stating a conclusion. So, for example, somebody's really worried, oh, why isn't he at the pub? Why hasn't he got here yet? Why hasn't he replied? And I say, well, look, it could be that he didn't receive your message. So it's just adding another possibility. The printer's not working. Well, it could be that it's run out of ink, or maybe it's not on at the wall. I don't know. I'm not a computer expert. I'm really not. Please do remember there is a free PDF that you can download to learn even more. And please do let me know any other alternatives to I think and ways of expressing your opinion down in the comments. The next one is somewhat formal and often used in the workplace. As far as I'm concerned, we need to increase the budget. So it's saying, in my opinion, this is how things need to be. So I think we need to increase the budget. As far as I'm concerned, we need to put more money into advertising. However, culturally, when we're a bit annoyed or a bit upset, we sometimes become more formal in standard everyday interactions. So even down the pub, if a British person becomes more formal, I've done a whole lesson about this that will be coming out very, very soon. If a British person gets more formal, it's probably indicative of the fact that they are a little bit annoyed. As far as I'm concerned, this was the worst meal I've ever eaten. Ouch. The way I see it introduces an idea of your interpretation. So maybe the way you're reading or understanding a situation or what somebody has done. So the way I see it, mate, I think you need to apologize. The way I see it, it's just not going to work. As far as I know, sounds like as far as I'm concerned, but this one tends to add a little bit of doubt. So it's like softening your opinion yet again. As far as I know, he got the message. It's referencing that the fact that your knowledge might not be complete. In other words, you might be wrong. So as far as I know, he got the message, but I'm not sure. Again, we can add extra phrases to soften the opinion even more. I found that is one that we use to highlight our experience or understanding based on evidence or what we've experienced previously. So, for example, I found that works better at night, or I found that this kind of marketing doesn't really work. I might be wrong, but is another one that sounds like we doubt our own opinion, but again, we might be using it because we're completely confident, but we don't want to sound arrogant. I might be wrong, but I don't think he's seen Star Wars. Or I might be wrong, but I don't think that's going to work. Again, it's usually when we're pretty confident of our own opinion, but we're sophening it a bit just to sound a bit politer. Again, it's adhering to British cultural rules, the idea of negative face and negative politeness. If your opinion sounds too direct and too strong, it could cause a problem. If you ask me is one that really makes me laugh. Now, it can just be used to give your opinion. Roy, what do you think of the project? Well, if you ask me, I think it needs a bit of improvement. That one makes me laugh because somebody did ask me, and I'm saying, if you ask me. However, what really makes me laugh is when people give their opinion using, if you ask me, without anybody asking for that person's opinion. If you ask me, we need to leave at 7 a.m. Or if you ask me, I think it needs a bit of improvement. Now, a funny reply to this that sometimes you'll hear, especially if a person doesn't like the opinion they've heard, if they say something like, if you ask me, I think it needs some improvement, they might reply, well, it's a good job nobody did ask you then, isn't it? Just to highlight, your opinion is not wanted. To be honest is something we say to give a bit more weight to our opinion. So instead of saying, I think it needs some work, you might say, to be honest, it needs some work. So the word honest is really adding that weight and making that opinion stronger. An alternative to honest is the word frank. To be frank, it needs a bit of work, or to be frank, I think you're out of line. Frank here just means honest. Now, Frank is also a man's name. And sometimes, instead of saying to be frank, people will say, I'll be frank. And if a person around you is pretty quick and quite witty, when somebody says, I'll be frank, they may just reply, well, I'll still be Roy, because it sounds like you're taking on the character of Frank. But literally, it means to be honest. And an alternative to be frank, to be honest, and I'll be frank is frankly speaking. Frankly speaking, that's not a good idea. All of them add a little bit more strength to your opinion. Now, notice something really important. In most of those examples, the meaning doesn't change that much, but the feeling does. Some options sound more certain, others sound more open, more reflective, or more casual. And when you have all of those available, you're not just speaking English, you're shaping how your message lands. It makes you a more interesting communicator. I mean, let's look at these four examples. You have, I think this is a good idea, but you could also say, I'd say this is a good idea. I think they're late. It seems like they're running late. I think we should wait. Well, I suppose we could wait a bit. I think this won't work. I'm not sure this will work, to be honest. Same core idea in each of those 4 sentences, but different ways of expressing it. Now, if you'd like to go even further with this lesson, I've created a free PDF with even more information. And remember, this lesson isn't about replacing your English, it's more about expanding it so you can say what you want to say in more than one way. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next lesson.